Hello and welcome to Hexed Countered. My name is Joe. Today I am going to be doing a first look at the game Fire in the Steppe. Battles in Ukraine 1941. This is a Panzer Grenadier game by Mike Benninghoff, PhD. Dr. Mike is the head of Avalanche Press, which obviously is the company that produces this game. It is part of the long-running Panzer Grenadier system. It is, to a large extent, a reworking of their game from the early 2000s called Eastern Front, or Eastern Front Deluxe as it was later known after they kind of upgraded it a little bit. And the scenarios are almost entirely different as far as I know, but the maps are the same and the counters are the same, except that they removed the Romanians from the mix, and they now sell that separately as Armata Romana. I am doing a series on platoon-level tactical games. This is one of the initial 4 that I'm going to be doing. I'm now leaning strongly towards expanding it to actually 6 games. We'll see how things go, what level of interest the videos get, etc., etc. I also have a lot of other things I want to do this summer, so this series will probably stretch out for several months before it's all said and done. But at the end, I hope to have given you guys a comprehensive comparison between the 4 games, possibly 6 games or 6 game systems rather. We will be looking at obviously Panzer Grenadier, also the Warstorm series, Nations at War, Platoon Commander Deluxe, and potentially the Tactical Combat, or TCS, Tactical Combat series from the Gamers MMP, depending on which one we're talking about. And that would probably be the game GD42, and also Fighting Formations from GMT Games, which we would be using the Gross Deutschland game, which was the first game designed by the late great Chad Jensen. And there is a sequel to that one coming out as well, so that would count as a series. If you're wondering about Platoon Commander Deluxe, because there's only the one game that has the full-on Flying Pig Games Deluxeified treatment, there are a series of games published by Flying Pig Games' sister company, Tiny Battle, covering various other things, including the Korean War, India versus Pakistan. There's a Poland one in there, and Sticks and Stones, I think. I may be missing one. I know there's at least 4. So that one is also a series. There's only been the one kind of deluxeified version, but I hold out hope that that one will get something else at some point in the future. Mark always has a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of things cooking, so we'll see how that goes. But to get back to the matter at hand, we have Panzer Grenadier here, and it will be the first look of this series. So as you can see, this is a relatively thin box, a little 1-inch box, so the maps are not mounted. You also don't get any dice, which that's becoming more of a common thing, I suppose. They assume correctly in most cases that most people have, most war gamers have tons of dice. That is certainly true. But I'm always a little bit bummed when I don't get some more dice. I got to admit. So let's flip this over and look at the back. So Fire in the Steppe, it does say 30 minutes to many hours, 2-player. This system is soloable. As you can see down here, it says solitaire play, excellent. So you can do this solo. Obviously, like as is the case with most 2-player games, they're better with 2 players, but there's nothing wrong with playing this guy solo. 200 meters per hex. So these are some of the things we will be talking about as we compare systems, is things like how big are the hexes, the time frames of the turns, things like that. The mechanical stuff that simulates combat, etc. So we got 200 meters per hex, platoon level, of course. The units are platoons. This particular game has 562 2/3 of an inch square counters. It's got 8 11 by 17 inch heavy cardstock maps. The rule book is 30 pages long. There are 42 scenarios included, 5 battle games, and a solitaire campaign game. Difficulty level is a 2 out of 5. This is a relatively straightforward system. It's a very good system. It's been around for 25 years. It's got staying power. So, but the core stuff is very easy to grok, to use the term. So don't feel like you can't pick this up and learn it fairly easily. There's a lot of nuance that gets added onto it. I don't want to use the word Chrome, but there's a lot of things that get added in. But the core of the gaming system is pretty straightforward. So this game is a complete Panzer Grenadier game based on the early battles of Operation Barbarossa in Ukraine, the huge tank battles around Brody and Dubno. There are 42 scenarios, as I already mentioned. They're organized into battle games that allow you to play the scenarios in sequence towards your army's operational goals. So, yeah, like campaigns, basically. They call them battle games, but you could also probably, in other gaming systems, they might call it a campaign. And you do have a solitaire campaign, which allows you to play as the Soviets, which is obviously the harder side to play. Early war, because they were not faring particularly well in the summer of 41. Let's open it up. Okay, so we have our Panzer Grenadier markers. So these are just basically, this is common to the system. You'll get this in all the games. Disruption markers, moved and fired markers, etc. Wire, the game turn, etc. On the back, there's things on the back, of course. So you have disruption and demoralized. Those are the two different levels. And once we get into the game, I'll talk about how that stuff works. We have dug in here as well on the other side of this. So a lot of these, this is fairly common too, as you guys probably know, is that you'll have kind of unrelated stuff on some of these like marker type counters where one side will be one thing that's really not related to what's on the other side. So you flip some over and you use a mixture of both sides of the same counter set, essentially. All right, so get nice decoy with a duck on it. That's always fun. Wreck counters, looks like a tank on its side. So some people don't like the markers in this game, but I don't have a problem with them. So now we have our counters. So they're a little chopped up, and this is something that initially, at least, some of the more veteran Panzer Grenadier players weren't all that fond of. This is basically, and you can see it says it right on the counter sheet right here at the top. It says Eastern Front, because as I mentioned, this is basically a hashing to some extent of that game, except the scenarios are different. There were 112 scenarios in Eastern Front Deluxe. This has 42. I think Armata Romana, which is the part they pulled out of this game, has like 30. So it's not like Eastern Front isn't still worth having, but you're going to have a duplicate counter set. But you can see that they're like this part in particular is kind of chopped up because they pulled the Romanian counters out. But here we have down at the bottom, you have leader counters. Leaders are very important in this system. They are probably the most important thing in this system because they have a lot of influence on what you can do in your turn. So you basically activate leaders who can activate everybody in their hex and also everybody around them in the 6 adjacent hexes. And the higher they are in rank, they can also activate leaders who are adjacent to them that are of a lower rank, and then you get a chain reaction essentially of activations where you can activate like an entire line of units for basically a really effective turn. You can activate units without a leader, but they're basically hamstrung. They can't move towards an enemy that can fire at them and hurt them. They can't do assaults, things like that. So basically they can move, but they can't really do much else. So that's these guys here, and you can see they range from corporal all the way up to colonel. And then we have a single strip here. These are obviously tanks. We do have a train counter. Whoops. Sorry, that guy was a little out of focus there. It's got a train counter right there. You see we have a Panzer 6E. That would be a Tiger, which didn't take part in this particular campaign. They weren't around in Barbarossa. But you do have the threes, the three H's. They very much were a part of Barbarossa. Now let's look at some of the Soviet counters here. So I had that upside down, sorry. So here you can see, again, it goes colonel all the way down to sergeant, and then you have a couple of commissars because they have a little bit, somewhat of a different role. They also have a train and a gunboat, I think is what this is, maybe. But you also have vehicles as well, T-37s, not particularly famous. But the famous ones would be in here as well. You do have T-34As right here. So there's the famous one. So we do have several counter sheets here. Basically two full. These two, if you stuck them together, would be a full one. This one and this one. And then you got some miscellaneous chunks here. Plus the markers. Now we've got our rule book, which, as we saw, is 30 pages long, unless they were lying to us, which they kind of were because it's 41 pages. But these are optional rules here at the back. There aren't a lot of graphics in here, but there are some. So here are the units. And again, once we do a playthrough, we'll talk about, what some of this stuff is here. But you can see here, this is a gun. So you have your unit type, your class. The movement is always in the upper right. You have your anti-tank fire and range here. And then your direct fire, which is basically like HE, direct fire and range down here. Armor for armored units would be here. You do have your national insignia. And then, of course, you have your leaders, and they have the effect to impact combat and morale, and they have their own morale ranking. And generally, not always, but generally the higher ranking leaders have higher morale rankings and are a little bit more powerful. You also get your kind of NATO symbology guide here. And the rules are not hard to get. They're not, you don't have to overthink a lot of this. It's really not that complicated. This is the 4th edition. So as I mentioned, this system's been around since 1998. It is 25 years old. So it's a mature system that's been put through the ringer. There are a ton of Panzer Grenadier games and expansions out there. And I mean literally a ton. There are a lot of them. So now we have here, this is our turn track, which is a little different from what you're probably used to. It kind of goes around in a circle, kind of starts here at 0600 and goes around in essentially like a hex shape, but it goes all the way around to 1745. You do have line of sight and spotting are in the game. So initiative also is an interesting thing. You roll for initiative. Each side gets kind of an initiative rating that they add to their die roll. And the higher one obviously wins initiative. But depending on how much higher you are, you might get more than one activation before your opponent can go. So that's kind of a key mechanic in the game as well. Obviously, we see here when the night does exist, of course. And if you're at night, you have night rules. But you can also, it's also got everything timed out for dawn and dusk. So, pretty, like I said, this is a mature system. Everything's pretty well established and well designed and thought out. Here's our direct fire player aid with all the column modifiers. This is a common thing, obviously. You'll see it in the other games too with, your basically your CRT and different types of CRTs. On the back, we have an anti-tank fire table. Basically, units can combine for direct fire. Units that are in the same hex and activated together can combine fire at a target. Anti-tank fire, however, is one unit at a time. So you can gang up on a tank, let's say, but each unit that's firing will have to roll separately for their attack. And there is a lot of rolling in this game because of morale. So that's something that some people ding the system about, is that there's a lot of dice rolling, especially with morale checks. Here's our terrain effect chart. The one ding I would give this is there's no visual key So it could sometimes be a little difficult. As you play, you pick it up, but it could be a little difficult at first to know what the differences are in some of these. It's multiple pages here, so you can see there's quite a long chart here. This is a system that covers all the theaters of the war. So you have, everything from jungle to desert to the European countryside, the steppes, built up areas. There's all kinds of terrain in here. You have terrain notes that also run more than one page. So this is obviously a key player aid that you need to keep an eye on. Here's our assault chart. Again, this is a third combat type. And on the back, you have a fourth, which is the bombardment chart for when you're firing artillery and so on, mortars, things like that, air. There, you can have aircraft and everything in this. It's a very fully fleshed out system with artillery. There is an edition that I think just came out, maybe, called Eastern Front Artillery, which allows you to put your artillery on the map. And gives you like a more robust treatment of the artillery. You actually get to have counters for it and stuff, which is pretty cool. I do not have that yet, but I may pick it up. And this is our scenario booklet. So another knock that some people have mentioned about this is there's no table of contents. But you can flip through and find what you're looking for pretty easy. Here's scenario 21, like a spear. It gives you the date. It gives you the starting situation, what maps you're using, and the configuration. Again, a common theme with both squad level and platoon level tactical games. When you have these geomorphic maps, you have an orientation and they stick together, and you can get a lot of terrain variation that way, of course. This one's a 28 turner. The first turn starts at 0900. We have a minor river, and then it tells you basically your order of battle for each side. We have our 297th Infantry Division with the Hermann Goering Anti-Aircraft Regiment. And then for the Russians, you have the 10th Tank Division, or elements thereof. Special rules, victory conditions, and the conclusion will tell you kind of what happened historically. So the scenarios are pretty cool. The solitaire game is at the end, and it's just kind of like a 2/3 of a page, basically. And it's just basically you play as the Soviets, and you want to inflict as much damage to the Germans as possible. This is centered in, as I mentioned, the Ukraine. It says right here, battles in Ukraine. So if you are playing as the Soviets, you're facing Army Group South. Here are our maps. So I'm going to reset the shot here so we can get a better look at it. Well, we might be able to see it. Yeah, we can see the whole thing if I do that. So this is obviously map number 8. That's 08. And it's very brown, which some people ding. The maps in Eastern Front were lighter. They were more of a yellowish brown color, which someone had a derogatory term for that I won't repeat. But you see here you have kind of a plateau with a contour line on it and a height as well. You have some trees here. So the maps are all... they're functional. They're not gorgeous per se, but I don't have any real issue with them. The counters will stand out really nicely against them. As you can see, the counters have a lot of contrast when you're looking at them against the background. These are obviously Soviet counters. The Germans are more of a gray color, which will also stand out here as well. Here we have a lot of forest. We have a little town down here. This is map 7. Whoops. Here we have map number 6, which is very forested and has a road. And then we have map number 5, which has some fields on it. Now this is Ukraine. It's very rural. There's a lot of open areas. The steppe did not provide a whole lot of cover for either side. It's very flat and, relatively featureless, I guess you might say. We have another plateau here. We have a little bit of a river or creek, depending. And again, in the scenario, it'll tell you what it is. And some fields here, a little bit of forest. Let's do number 4. Same thing. We have a plateau at the bottom, more fields, some forest, a town. All of these obviously are terrain effects that you will have to impact your combat. Here's map 3, town, forest, a river, a road with a bridge. Map number 2, if I can get it out of the box, is here with another town, a 2-level hill with a smaller hill over here. Again, a lot of open terrain around the area. Got some shell holes here. And map number 1. So yeah, as you can tell by the numbering, because there are the numbers of maps that are available for this game are really impressive. These are the first maps. So these are the first 8 maps for the system. Another village, fields, trees, etc. So that, my friends, is a look at Fire in the Steppe, which will be one of the 4 games. I'm not sure I'll play them in the order I do these videos in, but I will do all of them. And that's going to do it. I appreciate you guys taking time to watch, as always. There will be more videos in this series coming up in the not-too-distant future, including playthroughs. So be on the lookout for that. There will be other things mixed in as well, so there will be other videos in between these. But for now, that will do it. As always, thank you for watching. My name is Joe, and until next time, happy gaming.